If they could play anything, like build anything, why are they building the awkwardness of that condition?
The gamers are going to kill you for that, Alexis. They're going to just be like, that snotty architect woman.
Also feels kind of 90s, no?
Oh, the architecture definitely feels 90s, like the buildings themselves.
You don't have to actually get an education in architecture to become a licensed architect.
I'm Benjamin Ball, founder of Ball Noguez Studio, an interdisciplinary art, design, and fabrication studio in LA. I studied architecture and worked as an architect for about 8 years. I also worked as a set and production designer in Hollywood. I also make public art.
I'm Alexis Rettinger. I founded the architectural and hospitality design firm Preen Inc., and we're located in LA. Yeah, we're a band of architects, and we do a ton in F&B, food and beverage, and hospitality design space. Today, we're going to be checking out a game called City Skylines. This is the road or the boundary, like the property line. Oh, they're building the roads. Sort of planning, sort of diagrammatic, organizational method.
It looks like the topography changes in response to the locations of the roads automatically.
I would say this is not very good town planning because you really want to have an overlying principle to how you're laying it out. Like Amsterdam, it all radiates out with the canals. It's beautiful town planning. And I'm not sure this person's really thought it out ahead of time.
They're just kind of gridding it out like a greedy developer.
Oh wait, now we're doing the mountain. That'll be interesting. Okay, we've created some sort of dam.
A lot of times in planning, that's one of the first things you think about is the infrastructure.
Wow, look at that neighborhood.
It's hard to know why they're doing it. Like, what's the intent? Are they making like a company town for a mining operation? Are they trying to recreate a historical town? It's kind of hard to tell.
It does look like one of those kit towns that were built up around industry because the houses have not much backyard. They're almost like little prefabs. Yeah, but there's definitely no separation between the financial district and the residential, and everyone seems to be moving in. It's like they're cruising the strip.
The houses are pretty cookie cutter kind of American developer designed houses. Not a big fan.
No attempt at dark sky to protect the bats and nocturnal animals. I mean, if we're building a model city, we should be thinking about these things.
What are you using it to show? Is it being used to show a kind of faithful rendition of an average American small town? Or is it being used to, speculate about how the future could be?
Kind of reminds me of I don't know if you ever had that Lego thing where there was a map that was a small town and you could build the Lego gas station and then you had cars.
Yeah. Looks like it's supposed to be California or Arizona to me.
I mean, and they could have built anywhere.
It looks like the game really kind of privileges the idea of grids. Like it kind of seems like it wants to draw on grids. This just seems like they're trying to create a portrait of a city. They're trying to kind of make a believable city that we already sort of know.
But what's interesting to me is do you ever drive out in the desert where they've pre-laid and scripted all of these roads at some point, but it's just dirt and there's nothing there? And then you see those corners, see that curved corner right there?
Yep.
These moments where the development only was planned so far, so there's this weird, you just turn a corner and there's no reason geographically for it to stop. If they could play anything, build anything, why are they building the awkwardness of that condition?
The gamers are going to kill you for that, Alexis. They're going to just be like, that snotty architect woman thinks she knows what she's talking about. I mean, I'll say it too, though. This is kind of using great, amazing technology to envision something that is not considered successful amongst architects or planners. It's considered a kind of disease of capitalism. Well, I mean, the idea of designing a city from the standpoint of skyscrapers on a grid is a pretty well-worn way of thinking about the city in the 20th century. They're doing something that people have been doing for 75 years.
You could just pull this skyscraper from the tool palette?
Yeah, I'm guessing those skyscrapers come from a library, so you're just mixing and matching whatever you think, whatever you like. It's kind of like, do you remember Delirious New York by Rem Koolhaas? Did you ever read that?
Oh, yeah.
He talks about the Manhattan grid as just being this, providing a kind of space where you can do anything as long as it falls within the grid. And it's not about creating any kind of continuity, or the only continuity is that of the grid itself, not the buildings. The buildings don't match. They don't have a a unifying style or ideology behind them. They're just collaged in there.
That's a very interesting point. And I'd say like the whole idea of postmodernism, where there's this sort of collage, assemblage of aesthetic, right? In a way that's that same sensibility. It's just on a city level and not on one building.
This is kind of reminds me of like what happens in the real world. I mean, on a new city, they might lay out the streets, and then it's just, anything goes as long as it falls within the confines of the grid. Kind of no planning other than the streets themselves. This is the way that Houston's laid out. They don't have any zoning laws.
Yeah, well, Houston's wild. But it's true. And then downtown, they try to figure out how to get a park worked in after the fact sometimes.
Again, it's like hard to know what their intention is, other than to make it feel like a contemporary city. I mean, it's like they're building a world for a video game where the aesthetics matter, that it feels like the kind of collage of a contemporary city, but they're not thinking about the function of it.
And I was going to say, just the natural way that cities evolve too, like putting the high rises in before you put the lower building in, obviously wouldn't go that way because it was all lower at some point, and then those got demolished to become taller. Cool. Some trees. Trees are good. Palm trees, kind of LA-ish.
Oh, I guess they're working with like a southwestern climate. In an ideal world, that should affect the way that the city is designed.
You're absolutely right. And I'd have to say that the library is like every unremarkable architectural building possible.
This is definitely a capitalist city. It's not designed with any kind of overarching power.
At least the history gives cities some sort of paradigm of focus. Like in LA, we've got City Hall, so you can see the layering of time, and there's some sort of axes and ordering and relationship of building to building through that.
Yeah, thinking about how buildings, the adjacencies of buildings create spaces between them, and thinking about the spaces that result between buildings, thinking about how circulation infrastructure impacts placement of buildings.
And I'd have to say, if this were like, let's say an architecture student or an urban planner designing this sort of city, I would almost guess the cars to be invisible, and there would be some sort of public rail system.
They would design the utopian city, maybe. Is that what you're saying?
Also feels kind of 90s, no?
Oh, the architecture definitely feels 90s, like the buildings themselves. It's kind of like designing with Revit. Everything's parametric, everything's automated. Looks like it was designed by Revit when you design with Revit. Looks real.
Yeah, looks like Texas, but with palm trees.
Looks like Texas. They're building trains in Texas.
I used to love to, in the backyard, build roads and rivers and dams. Back in the early days before we had video games.
These kinds of tools and the kinds of tools that architects and planners use. You can create iterations and variations on a design so rapidly using a video game engine.
And the other interesting thing is you don't have to actually get an education in architecture to become a licensed architect. You just need 8 years of working and being signed off working for a licensed architect, and then to pass all the exams.
Is that true of every state, though?
And then you have to take your state exam. It's different.
Yeah, that's great. That you can just intersect the roads, and it immediately lays out all of the crosswalks, all of the signage, the lamps, the curb cuts, all of that. It's not that different than the way that something like Revit works. You have to make more decisions.
Yeah, it's true.
Revit.
It's a little bit visually stale, I have to say, though. It doesn't have the atmospheric effects, and maybe just because the creator hasn't designed that in that world, but it's just a little bit utilitarian looking to watch.
Yeah, that's kind of what I see it. It seems really normal to me. It looks like a lot of cities developing in the world right now. I wonder if that's what the designer was going for. Are they trying to make a city that's about getting out of your car? Doesn't seem like it. Is it a city that's meant to be compact and dense?
And our beautiful cities are beautiful because they have constraints. Like think about New Orleans and the levee, and San Francisco being surrounded by water, New York. There's a certain character and density and interestingness to them that escapes Houston because it can just move infinitely. Okay, so they got the atmosphere in. The skyline, planetary. What are we looking at? What's green? Kind of looks like a city.
This is a pretty monumentally scaled gesture here. Like, look at this long axis.
Yeah, it kind of looks like a stream that's going to run into some sort of restaurant-y kind of space. But at least they were starting to think about a moment of the sacred. For more Experts React, subscribe to Gameology.
For more Gameology videos, head over to Facebook and YouTube.
It really illustrates how important it is to have proper city planning and really think about scale of the human to the environment, what the overall intention for not only the city, but ourselves as humans is.
I agree with what Alexis said. I love it.